Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator, bringing you this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, in transition, or possibly stuck, and giving them access to career stories from people who have already been through what they've been through, so that they might feel inspired to maybe try something different in their life. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing Kaitlyn Tucek, and she's an artist, so this is going to be a little different interview than some of the business interviews that we've done. Hello, Kaitlyn.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm very excited.
Me too.
So as you know, listeners, and Kaitlyn, I always like to start with the icebreaker questions because I think it's so important to understand who you are as a person. So where did you grow up? How many siblings? And how do you think that influenced you in the in your life? You know, birth order, that whole thing.
Birth order, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was the little sibling, so
I
guess I have a lot to prove. So I grew up in New York. I'm from Long Island originally. I'm from sort of the middle of the island, North Shore. Smithtown is the name of the town. Big place, though. It's a suburb of New York City, so still a really large town. My graduating class in high school was probably around 800 or so.
Wow,
so,
yeah, that's big.
Yeah. Which, you know, now that I've moved around a little bit, I have perspective that, oh yeah, that's quite large. My sister was about 4.5 years older than me. So we weren't really close because we never went to school together. Yeah. We were always separated by middle school.
When you're that young, I mean, everything is a big gap, right?
Yeah.
At 4 years, yeah.
But now we're close. But I definitely had that sort of tag-along mentality when I was little. And I think I learned to do a lot of things by myself. My mom said I would just sort of find myself in a room singing to myself, drawing, or a lot of pretend play. I would build forts and, you know, act out entire scenes and really imaginative stuff. I mean, I was very social and outgoing, but, you know, just because my sibling probably didn't really want to play with me, that I was,
but also,
you know, off
sounds
doing
like
my own thing.
Okay being by yourself.
Totally okay,
and finding a way to entertain yourself, yeah.
And my household was extremely encouraging. I was really lucky. I think I showed creative interests and abilities very early on, and things like, oh, can I paint all over the walls in my room this flower motif? My parents were like, sure, it'll look lovely. You know, I mean, it was very...
It's your room.
It's probably not that normal, but it was very supportive. And so, yeah, it was a nice environment to grow up in and really learn who I was and feel allowed to do that. Yeah. You know, to have the space to be myself.
What did your parents do for a living?
My dad did a lot of things. My dad has passed away. He passed away about 8 years ago. But he was mostly worked in construction and things like that. Working for things like building car wash like equipment and traveling all over the country and installing whole car washes and for this certain company. So he found himself in a lot of jobs where he was making and creating, and he was a really good woodworker as well. But I think probably looking back, he probably should have been a chef because he cooked dinner for us every night. We lived sort of organic before that was a thing. He was very big on his garden. I ate food that, you know, let's say when I first started dating people, they would be like, what is that? And I'm like, what? You don't know? So
well, when I think New York, I don't think garden.
No, he also, when he was younger, he worked as an arborist, so we knew a lot about trees and plants. Wow. And and then my mom was a manager of a medical office. My mom's the kind of person that everyone goes to talk to. People will come to her. You could see people come across the room like, that's just the person I need to tell all my things to. She's just very calm and comforting and wise. And so she was a born manager. Just
relating to people and in the medical space like that, then it's probably even a double gift for her. So did you play sports, learn any musical instruments or another language maybe?
I mean, in Smithtown, you're very privileged because the school systems in New York are just pumped with tax money, so you get everything. So let's say I was very odd because when I was little, I watched like 1930s movies, and so all the times that I was asked to pick something, I for an instrument in like the 6th grade, I chose a clarinet, which is not really normal, I guess, and I wasn't very good at it. But I think I was really into Glenn Miller at that time.
So that's why you picked the clarinet.
I was like, oh, clarinet, that's what I want to play. I was like, I don't know how to do
Glenn
this
Miller
at all.
In the 6th grade. That's funny.
Yeah. And I played field hockey and lacrosse, but I'm not competitive. I tend to my personality is really competitive with myself, but not anyone else. And so I didn't take to sports very well. I was like, oh, this is so aggressive. And like, I don't want it that badly, I think. So I ducked out of those things pretty early. But I was lucky because art was really readily available where I grew up. So I quickly rolled into all of those things.
Well, that's great because you hear that art, sports, well, not sports as much. I think more it's art and music get cut so much from, public school programs or any of those school programs. Not New York.
It's pretty nice.
Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about on the fun meter scale of 1 to 5. Couch potato 1, life of the party 5. Where do you put yourself?
I can be both.
Oh.
Yes. I have times where I want to stay home, and I think I'm a true nerd. Currently I probably have like 30 books out of the library, which is very normal for me. And then at the same time, if someone was telling me they were throwing like an 80s dance party tonight, I'd be the first person to want to be there, dancing by myself in the middle of the dance floor, So I'm both are completely my element, and
So you live in all worlds. It sounds like very cool.
Yeah.
And then taking risks, same scale of 1 to 5. Where are you as a risk taker?
That depends. If we're talking like thrill-seeking sports, 0. It's not my jam at all. Taking risks in like career stuff, I'm first person in line probably, but. Yeah. So
can you give me a number, or are you?
5 for career stuff, if that's the highest. Yes. Yeah. Okay. And 0 for adventures.
Adventures in sports.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about what it's like to be an artist. Mm-hmm. So, tell us what your art style is. I guess is that the right way, to ask about it? Is
sure.
It your style or?
Yeah, I think style is a good word. Medium sometimes gets brought up. What's your medium? Which, but. Over time, towards the end of the 20th century, a lot of artists started working in a lot of mediums. So now it's a little more commonplace for everyone to say, well, I work in all of these mediums. And then they say they're a multi-media artist, which I sometimes say, but mostly I'm a painter. I am guided more by stories, I think. And then the stories help me determine what medium I would like to use. Which is usually drawing, printmaking, mostly 2D work. So painting, drawing, printmaking, let's see. Fiber arts, I sew into things, or embroidery. Rarely video or digital. Digital, yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Or sculptural works. I'm not as much. I've had 20-something years of education, and I've never taken a ceramics course. So, yeah, you won't see much sculpture from me.
So you've just been kind of drawn to certain things and stick with that medium. And
yeah, I think, going back, I started in figure drawing and location drawing when I was about, I don't know if you want to roll into that.
Well, yeah, so let's talk about how did I get here?
Yeah.
So as a young person, you talked about painting your walls in your bedroom. So did you know you wanted to be an artist at a certain age? Was there a day that you kind of woke up and said, yeah, this is what I'm going to do?
Mm-hmm. I think it, for sure, it changed forms. Mostly what you have access to, right, is what what guides you. So I think initially the first things I would pay attention to were architecture. So I think maybe at first I was like drawing house plans, and somehow I got my hands on house plans. It was like, that's I want to do that. And I must have been in like 5th grade.
And so were you thinking like architecture sort of at that time then too, or? Okay.
Yeah, which now I look back, I never would have done that. That's not, I don't like.
There's math involved
rules
with that.
At all.
And structure.
Yeah. So I think I went from that, and then when I was a little older, there was a fashion drawing course in middle school. I think I took in maybe 7th grade, 8th grade. But I could see, I think early, you could see I had a little bit of an edge. There was something that was easy in it for me.
An edge draw. As in talent.
I guess
skill.
Personally, I hate the word talent because it's a lot of times I think that's what holds people back is they think they need to have talent when in reality I've just had like thousands of hours of practice at something, you know.
Mm-hmm. So it's more you stick it out.
You stick it out.
Yeah, because I draw something, I'm not happy with it. I don't like try to make it better, or I'm just like, nope, I'm not an artist. I mean, I just kind of put myself in that category.
Right. And I like to use a metaphor like, well, would you just sit down at a piano for the first time and start playing? Never. You would never know what you were doing.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't give up. So I don't know
if
why.
If you really wanted to play.
Sure, yeah. And so I don't know why people think that they're expected to sit down and draw a portrait of someone that they find to be satisfying. That, you know, we should have a lower expectation of what we're able to do immediately.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I do think that's some insight that most people don't get.
Sure,
and you think you just want to be good right away. It should be easy, right?
Or you have this image of what you want it to look like in your head. And I think most creatives will tell you that that's something that takes a long time to achieve, is to satisfy what that looks like in your mind versus what it looks like in real life.
So even you have that where you're like that first version and then the second and okay.
Oh yeah, and I imagine it'll just continue on for the rest of my life because I'm going to keep working my skills and my brain to match what I can ask myself to do, you know, or want myself to do. But so going back, I took the fashion course. And then when I was about 14, I started figure drawings class on Wednesday night with a mentor.
How did you find the mentor? Was it a teacher?
So his name was Jeffrey K. Fisher. He passed away, but he was a professional illustrator. He was involved with the Society of Illustrators in New York. He had gone to Smithtown High School years back. He was probably in his 40s when I first met him. Father, this bombastic man. I mean, huge man, looks like a lumberjack, big voice, yells at everybody. Like he will, if you walk past him, he'll just like bump into you like he didn't even see you. You know, all those kinds of things. And you're like, oh my gosh, like who is this person? So he was this little kid in middle school, and he would come in and he would volunteer his time. And your first introduction to him was like, throw all the tables together. Someone get up there and start moving around. Everyone grab pencils and draw them. And you're like, what? And that was fashion illustration. But it was drawing from life. It was learning to trust your instincts. And then he would be like, well, I host figure drawing class on Wednesday nights. And on Sundays for the warm months of the year, we also gather at a parking lot. And we drive to a location, and we location draw all day. And then we come home, and we look at all the works, and we critique them. And it's from anywhere from, like, 15 years old to 30. And so that was my life. I mean, Jeff was it. That was my community of people.
And your parents, sounds like
fully
they were so supportive.
Yeah.
They're driving you, right, to the...
This is hard. And I really, like, look back, and I'm pretty open-minded. My kids are very... used to art. I mean, they go to all the art openings with me, and they
obviously.
But I still think it's hard to digest. Your 14-year-old daughter comes home and says, I'm going to take nude figure drawing class on Wednesday nights, and my parents were definitely like, okay, can we speak to Jeff? And I'm like, yeah, Jeff's great. Here's his number. And then it didn't take long for my parents to be like, we love him. He's wonderful. We couldn't ask for a better opportunity. Like, how do you find something like that?
That's
such a blessing.
So super successful, but giving back to the community.
Yeah.
And then, but also had his own programs, but that sounds like they were maybe affordable that a regular person.
I don't even know if we paid him. I think he was the kind of teacher that was like, I don't care, just pay me later. Like, it was so much more about building a community and knowing that you belonged somewhere rather than Jeff necessarily worrying about, I'm not saying that people should not get paid for things at all. I just mean that it was more like, these doors are open and you show up for class, I'm going to teach you.
Wow.
no matter the circumstance.
Wow.
You know,
Very generous.
very, very, very loving, very generous. And to this day, these are some of my best friends. And even, you know, with age gaps and stuff too, these are still people that I go back to and say, I'm having a lot of trouble with this. Can you think of anything? And you know, this is my community.
Wow.
So
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you started in his class in high school. I'm guessing you were
Yeah.
taking art classes as well.
Yes. Smithtown, also very lucky. They had AP Art History and AP Art. I had in 11th and 12th grade. And advanced placement art, you have to create a portfolio. So you have to come up with a thesis and
So what's
work
a
on that.
thesis like in art then? Give us some insight into that.
Oh, if I could remember, I don't really know. I know
Is it
that
like it's a collection so that it all has to be like
the content
connected?
should be sort of in line with your thesis, and you create a body of work based on that. I mean, it's essentially the same thing now as when I create a show. You know, the last show exhibition I had at Leon Gallery that was in the fall of 2019. I spent a year studying an artist and then created work based around that idea. So I mean, I don't really recall what my junior and senior thesis were, but it would have been a similar endeavor.
So almost like you're creating your own show.
Yeah.
Or your own exhibition.
Yeah, and then you submit it digitally to New York State, and you get graded on it essentially, and whether or not you get your AP scores, you know. So. I was lucky to have really good art teachers in high school, but then also have Jeff on the side. So I think we were known for being a pretty good high school. Colleges I was recruited essentially for Pratt. They came in like senior year because we had that extra because we were taking figure drawing, you know. I mean, because that wasn't at school. That's not allowed. You're not going to have to do figure drawing in school. So yeah, we were all pretty lucky.
Very cool. So then maybe that's why he wanted to give back, because he got that start because he was part of that initially.
Yeah, he did have teachers that had worked there and taught him outside of the school. Yeah, now that I think about it.
So did you get a scholarship then? There's a difference between being recruited and a scholarship, or is that?
Pratt is a very expensive school. So I did get a scholarship, but it's still very meager compared to the overall cost of school. Mm-hmm. But yes, I mean.
So we're not talking full ride.
No, not full ride. That would have been nice. I don't know if they give a full ride to anyone really. I don't know. But yeah, that would have been nice. Yeah. That would have changed a lot.
So I am not very educated here. Where is Pratt?
Pratt's in Brooklyn. It's in the neighborhood of Fort Greene. It's been around since the 1800s.
So you're still in that same somewhat community.
Yes, I could still be near home, essentially, and all of those things that I was used to. It's about an hour from where I grew up in Brooklyn, and then I had friends that were going there from that community already. So my best friend to this day, his name's Ian Cinco, and he was 2 years ahead of me at Pratt. So it was really nice to like enter into a school as well where there were already pockets of people that I was like, oh, I'm familiar with you, and I can just slide right in. And
now, did you have part-time jobs?
Oh yes. Yes, I mean, I was the first person really to go to college, and my mom went to Catherine Gibbs secretarial school when she was younger, so I shouldn't say I'm really the first, but as far as going away to college, my sister chose she went into nursing school and things, but I was the person in my family to first go away to college. Very cool. That wasn't necessarily affordable for our family, so I had to pay my own way, basically, and I worked in high school I worked as a waitress at restaurants in Long Island, and then when I went into Brooklyn I just kind of found similar jobs, and so I worked while going to school and during the summers and things like that.
And did you live in the dorm?
I did. Senior year I got an apartment in Brooklyn with a close friend of mine, which was really nice. I was very at home in Brooklyn too. It was very like, as soon as I was there, I was like, oh, this is where I'm meant to be. These brownstone tree-lined streets, and there's something really nice about it. It's really beautiful, but it's gritty. a lot of creative things, a lot of buzz. So it felt good.
Wow, so good energy for you.
Very good energy.
So at that time you felt like, I'm in the right place. I know what
Totally.
I'm doing.
Yeah.
Got this path. So you graduate college then, and
Oof, that's the
what is
hard
that like?
part.
I mean, what is the career path of an artist?
It's awful. So the obstacles I faced post college were pretty hard, pretty heavy. If I could provide advice for anyone, it'd be like, just, you don't have to go to college immediately. This is not something you have to rush into. You take your time. It's always there. Because, you get out and you're like, well, what do I do? And how in the world am I going to pay these college loans? This is crazy. I mean, Pratt cost me nearly $130,000 that I had to pay off.
Wow, it's a mortgage.
It's a lot of money. And that Pratt does, I don't know if they do now. I mean, I graduated in 2006. Not great career service guidance.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Was there any help?
No.
No.
It was very challenging. So I worked at, I think I worked at the ESPN Zone in Times Square for a while because I made a lot of money. I mean, servers in New York make a lot of money. I was, for being like 22 years old, I was probably making like $50,000 a year.
Wow.
Waiting tables, which was the only way at that time that I could pay for an apartment and try and pay off like $900 loan payments a month. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was really, really challenging.
And did it give you your days free then? Were you working nights so that you could be...
Honestly, I think I pretty much gave up. I quickly could not. I should clarify too. I went to school for illustration. That was my degree. Mm-hmm. My plan was to be a freelance illustrator. That is
Which means what? I mean, for magazines, you would illustrate...
Illustration is wide-ranging. So it could be anything from like the new stamp to book covers to... You could go into motion graphics and do, ESPN, like moving swooshes while games are going on, or, the illustration is very varied. Or books, children's books, or, you never know. But and maybe that's why I went, and now I'm a fine artist, is that it didn't really suit me. I didn't want to take on other people's jobs. It was very hard for me to be like, sure, I'll do exactly what you say, and then draw these things and feel like, this doesn't feel right to me at all. I'm not doing anything I wanted to do. But I wasn't good at it. I had like zero connections. So I had no examples of how I was supposed to become essentially my own boss, an independent illustrator in a studio somewhere, just
I would say I'm guessing there's not like internships for something like that.
There are, but I was working in school, and that's what got really difficult for me, is that I wasn't able to just go to school and have free time to be mentored by someone and go to events and meet people and then get an internship, and then there's a lot of those opportunities, but I couldn't do it. I had to make money. So I say within a year of graduating, I also backpacked across Europe. I think I sort of was like, I should just up and leave.
I'm young.
I want to see the world. And I grabbed a backpack, and with my best friend, Beth, we just tramped around Europe for a few months. And when I came back, I was really lost. I was really like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing and how to do any of this. And I probably didn't make any art for years, really, like maybe 6 or 7 years in reality.
Wow.
After college. It was, it's hard for a 20-something to digest that much financial burden.
Overwhelming.
It's very overwhelming.
Well, and you probably don't even really know the scale of it until you kind of get older to recognize what that scale is and what you can pay off.
And my family not having any experience of this, I don't think they could really guide me. And then my father got sick. He had lung cancer, so there wasn't really anybody there that had necessarily had a lot of time for me to sit down and be like, okay, let's help you through all this, because everybody had their own things to deal with. And
well, and then there's financial,
which is fine.
obligations with the
Yes,
illness like that
definitely.
too, that really changed that. So what kind of jobs were you doing? So you were at the ESPN
I was at
zone?
the ESPN zone. That is, don't get that. I mean, they're all closed down now, but don't work in Times Square ever. Oh God. It was just it's just, you never know what time of day it is, and that kind of was, environment. I worked there. I worked at a production studio for a little while. There was I worked at PJ Clark's. That's a very well-known New York staple restaurant. It's been around for 100-some years. That was a good job too, and I made a lot of friends there. And you get a lot of big money real estate kind of people. And there was a really old man. His name was Dick Levy. He was wonderful, an old bachelor, and maybe when I met him, he was 80. I don't know. And he would, and I know this could sound odd in some ways, but we just became very good friends, and we'd go to lunch and things, and he helped me get a job at a production studio. He just thought I was feisty, I think. He just found me very entertaining, and he was like, you need to get a job outside of this restaurant.
So he saw the potential and wanted to help you.
Yeah. And he helped me. So he got me a job in a production studio, and I worked there for a little bit. And then I worked, I think it wasn't enough money. I still couldn't pay off the loan payments every month. It was just challenging. And then I went back to waiting tables. I worked at Porterhouse, New York, in Columbus Circle, which was actually a really nice job. Like benefits, kind of.
What?
Waitressing. Yeah. New York waitressing, or these server gigs or could, be lifelong jobs. They're pretty good jobs. But I met my husband, and he was life-changing. Because, my friends are artists, and we're all just, I don't know what we're supposed to be doing,
yeah.
Like we're all sort of confused and working it out. And so Matt, my husband, he was brought up in a military household. He moved all over. He spent most of his high school and college in Kentucky and Tennessee. He then moved to Boston, got a job for the Department of Labor, visited New York. We met and quickly fell in love. We have a wonderful relationship. We've been together 12 years or so. But he was like, just immediate assessment, like, this is not working. You cannot, this isn't going to work. Like, this has to be fixed somehow. Like, you can't, work at a restaurant till 12 a.m. every night when this isn't, your dream or anything like that. And you also need to pay these loans off. He didn't have any college debt. Poor thing, had to meet me.
And now he has college debt.
Yeah. And so I think he really encouraged me to go back to school. I went to grad school at Queens College, which is a CUNY school, which is an excellent school. I mean, I'm very lucky to have gone to Pratt, but I don't have the best relationship with Pratt in my undergrad program, but my grad program in Queens College, I'm very proud of. And I think that's why I said, like, take time. Because once I was in grad school and in my late 20s, I knew what I wanted to do. I was empowered to talk to people about the program and the classes I was taking. And, like, at that point, I was working for free. I interned at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I interned at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. I was trying so hard in the in-between spaces to get myself in the door somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and did you have a better sense then of what the business side of art meant?
Yes.
Sounds like in your undergrad that
no idea.
Wasn't really part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds very sad because that's when you needed it, right?
Right.
That there's a business side of that. I interviewed a musician, and he said he actually, his first college he went to didn't have what he was looking for, but the second one did, and he got this music business minor, and then he also got the music, but it was about the business of being in the music business.
Yeah.
It's
very essential.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, but I did go, for grad school I went for art education. So I'm a certified New York State art teacher, K through 12. And then I became an elementary school art teacher for 3 years, and I really dedicated myself to that job. I loved it. I had like 600 students. I was very good at it, but was
and were you kind of
isolating.
inspired in a way because of the mentor that you had?
Oh, very.
Yeah.
Oh,
and how do
very.
you give back in that realm?
Right.
And,
To know how crucial it was to have a community and have had spent now the past few years without a community in a way and feeling very lost and reflecting on the fact that that was so vital to my growth when I was so much younger. I mean, I remember there's a very famous artist, her name's Kiki Smith, and she was talking at Ace Hotel one night. It was a small group, and I got tickets, and I went, and I was very young and went over to her, and I said, do you have any advice for young artists? And she said, and now I just think, man, she so nailed it. She looked at me and she said, you need to find your community. And basically moved on, and I was like, okay.
And what does that mean?
I know. But it was like, yeah, you're precisely right. You just can't really grow as a creative unless you have a support system.
And your husband maybe was the first step of that community and that support system.
I think he was. I think he was much more rational. I mean, he's an economist, so of course he's very rational.
It goes with the territory, right?
And it was so nice to have someone so rational and practical in my life to say it's easy. We just do A, B, and then you get C, and you're like, oh, man, I was just looping around everywhere. I didn't know. So I think going back to school helped me get back on track.
Even though that was more debt then, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
But not too much, because Queens College is a city university in New York, so it's essentially like $1,000 a class you could pay. I paid out of pocket, basically, because I was working. Deferred the prior loans. I mean, it's all a mess in reality. It's like you look back and you're like, oh my gosh. College is tricky. And starting out in your early 20s, knowing you're going to be your own boss, that's hard. I mean, that's starting your own business, essentially. You know, that's what you do as an artist and illustrator and a freelancer. That's really hard for a 22-year-old to conceptualize.
I did it when I was like 50-something. Oh my God, it's the hardest thing I've done. To get my mindset and so how did you get your big break then? Or what kind of broke you from then teaching then into, okay, now this is how I'm going to create, and you actually have shows and...
Yeah. Well, I mean, truly, it's not until we paid the loans off, because that financial burden was really hard for me to... I think there's a level of depression that goes along with that kind of debt. And I looked, and to know that you couldn't really fulfill your dreams and pay off your debt, that was very confusing, right? So we got married, and Matt basically convinced me to move to Denver, which we had never even visited or anything prior. But I said, sure, I guess it's time. We want to start a family, and it's very hard for me to leave New York and my family. I mean, New Yorkers, I think, are known for thinking New York is the center of the universe. So
that's good to know. I don't know.
Oh yes, we can't help ourselves. There's big ego
because
you
it
know?
is. No,
but it's hard to peel a New Yorker out of New York, you know. So it took.
And he'd been all over, so for him it's like
no big deal.
So why Denver for him?
It was sunny. That's what he learned.
Oh, he learned it was sunny.
That's it. That is, and he was like, and I'll go skiing, and I'm like, okay. So we left New York, and I think it was a blessing. So I should clarify, like I tried really hard through my internships and working at the MoMA. I applied for jobs after jobs. I went on interviews. I was frequently like, oh, it's between you and this person, and then it would be like, we went with the other person, and I was going deeper and deeper into this. I'm not sure what I need to do, but I love being an elementary school art teacher, but I don't love being by myself at all. And that's, especially in elementary, that's what happens, is it's you and 600 kids, and there's no team really, nobody really cares about the art program, and I was putting everything into it. I mean, I was doing really conceptual projects, and the kids were flourishing, and I was like, that isn't, I think teachers are amazing. I mean, you just don't ever stop working. So I don't, I knew that wasn't it for me for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then not being able to get any other position, I thought Matt really had the best solution to our problems. And so we moved here. He basically got a job transfer, which is amazing. And then we flipped a house. I mean, we had come from Brooklyn, which when I first moved to Brooklyn, apartments probably were $100,000 and now are selling for $900,000, you know? So we saw that growth in the real estate there, and when we came to Denver, you just kind of smell it in the air. It was like, oh.
What year was this, if you don't mind sharing that? 2013. So it was after the 2008-9 financial crisis.
Yes.
And okay, so it's kind of on the uptick.
On the uptick.
But still low. Things were low.
Right. I mean,
you were buying low.
We bought a house for $200,000. I mean, that is not a thing in New York. So we flipped it after 2 years, and we didn't really have to. We did some minor things and took all that money and paid all my loans off, and that was it. And that in the same time period, I had my son Nico, and I think especially then I had the privilege, and this comes from I also have a master's degree in education and child development and stuff, so I really wanted to be home with my kids. That was something I felt strongly. I mean, everyone has different wants and needs, and for me that felt right. And so I was actually able to do that, where we were able to live on Matt's income. That's just unfathomable back home. I don't really know many stay-at-home moms back in New York, and so to be home in those first few months with Nico and sit there, and then also not really have that burden anymore of those loan payments, it was just the universe opened up for me. It was
freedom.
I can do it.
Wow.
I felt that. How could I raise? I'm dorky. I'm gonna teary-eyed. But how could I raise my son and say that you should be everything you want to be and not be doing it myself? So it really turned the page for me that this is my opportunity. I need to take it. And I think I started working again. We had an extra room in the house. I had a studio. I mean, that was also something I hadn't had in years. And I just started emailing galleries, which is not really the normal way to go about things. But I wasn't embarrassed. I wasn't scared. I thought, whatever.
You weren't judging yourself. You were just putting yourself out there.
Yeah, and I just wrote, I think I'd be a great fit for your gallery. Would you like to show my work? And Anthology Fine Art and Framing, Zach and Kendra, who are wonderful, they wrote me back and they said, we do too. You should show your work. And I remember just being like, Matt, oh my God.
They said yes. And this was all local?
Yeah.
You were reaching out to local galleries?
Yeah. And so from that point, and I don't know if that was 13 or 14, maybe it was 2014 I had a show with them. I will say that the more that you're really putting yourself out there, while there are times that can be very draining and you can make yourself very vulnerable, so it can be hard on you, it also gives you more and more momentum and confidence to keep going for new things. Yeah. I do think that.
So when you said you reached out to these galleries, did you already have, were you just creating in your spare time? So you had these works that were just in the garage or
I just started
in the studio
working. And
so you were doing what was giving you joy or what was inspiring you, and then sent letters and said, hey, I think you should show this.
Yeah. And then once they picked it up, I think there was such a fire in me that I made so much work. Yeah. And from there, it's just gotten better.
And then did you then just keep using that same strategy, just kind of sending that the work to different galleries, seeing what they wanted to pick up? And
I think that I saw an opportunity in the fact that I was new to town. That was different. I'd never been that. I think that's a weird thing, being from New York and having to get into places in New York. You felt like you just didn't have that chance. And so here I was really able to Instagram was a great asset, especially as a mom being at home nursing a child. I can't get off the couch. I can't do anything, right? So I'm just messaging people on Instagram. hey, can I come for a studio visit? And this has been, I mean, Denver has been such an open, friendly, welcoming environment that nearly everyone was like, sure. And you're like, oh, okay, I'll come then. And build relationships
that's
from
so
those
cool
things.
to hear, because I hear that in a lot of the business conversations that I have about the network here, the people here. And people will say, yeah, I've come here and I'm surprised that it's so welcoming.
Yeah.
And it's like mainly because there is a lot of people that have moved here and they want to be welcoming, or they were welcome. So there's this, I want to welcome because I was welcomed when I came. So that's cool to hear. But also in the artist world.
Yeah, very. I think so. It's one of the things that makes Denver really special as an art scene.
So relationships became important. You just start meeting the galleries and they're like, oh, this artist wants to come by. And
I mean, and that's not, and I shouldn't sugarcoat that too much. That's hard. I mean, Leon Gallery represents me now, and I just had a show there in October, but that Leon's been my favorite space in the city since we moved here, and we've been here 6 years. And slowly I just made Eric and Eric like me, you know. I mean, slowly I just kept bothering them, and then I think they grew to really respect me, respect my tenacity, enjoy conversations with me. And I didn't go for a show. I didn't propose anything to them until I was really sure that this was the thing. So that's another thing. I think I pay a lot of attention to timing and respecting the person I'm also proposing to, right? So I'm not gonna inflate my ego or work and think, like, at this point, let's think. It's not like I'm going to go to the Denver Art Museum and say, you should show my work. I mean, they're going to be like, what? That would be ridiculous. I know that. And it's important for me to know that. But I can also say, I should start building relationships there and having them see that I could pull off a bigger show, because maybe in 10 years I would like to have a large show there. So, you know, there's goals that I set for myself, and little by little I meet people, and also should clarify that I try very hard to not put myself in positions that I don't actually want to be in, or relationships I don't want to have. You know, everything feels sincere and genuine, and like I enjoy talking to this person. I think they're smart. I think they care, and that's who I want to be with. That's where I want to go. So I try to pay attention to all those details and put myself in the right place in the right time, and that kind of, strategy,
yeah.
I guess.
So how did you, I saw one of your announcements was it the city of Fort Collins?
No, I haven't shown in Fort Collins.
Or is it, which city that you did a big...
I had I was in a group show at Artworks Loveland.
Loveland. I'm sorry. There was another
That's
L.
okay.
Well,
and
that's
then
not even close. I wasn't even close.
It's up there.
Yeah.
It's so close. And then I had a residency over the summer, 2 summers ago, at Firehouse Art Center in Longmont.
Okay. So I think it was the Longmont one where you were, your works were about...
The community.
The community,
yes.
Yeah. And you actually stayed up there?
So I would go up 3 days a week, I think. It's about an hour drive from here, from Denver, or a little less. And I would stay for hours, and what I proposed to them, I got this residency because over time I became good friends with Jessica Quinman Parker, who is now actually the curator at Dairy Arts Boulder, but she was a curator at Firehouse, and included me in a group show on mark making a while back. And then over time, it was a similar thing. I had an idea, and I thought, and she was looking for artist in residence, and I thought, this is it. This is where this is going to work. So it was easy for me to go to her and propose it to her, and her bring it to the group, and everyone votes and whatnot. So that was a great residency, and the whole concept was this idea. I was reading Bachelard's Poetics of Space, and it really talked about home. I tend to really think about home and nostalgia, and probably because my father passed, so there's a lot of things that memories I try to hold on to, and the process of that is very interesting to me. And the goal was to collect ephemera from the entire community and eventually build a site-specific immersive installation that the community would then come back into and find themselves involved in. very positive feeling, we're all together community kind of aspect. This is also post 2016 election, and, you know, I mean, there's been a lot of divisive feelings, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it was really a goal to bring people together in the same space and hope that they could engage in conversations where they saw that they were the same. You know, there's things that we have in common. We have the same grocery list that we make every day, even though there might be different items on them. Or I collected things off the street as well, like chairs and coat hangers and hats that I would find on the street. So I would walk around the streets and then just walk up to people and be like, hi, I'm your local artist in residence, and I would love to have any sort of weird ephemera you have on yourself. And it was definitely met with a lot of, what?
Yeah.
I would not say it was the most successful project. I don't tend to have a lot of regrets, but that was a really big endeavor, and I think that eventually in life I would like to try it again somewhere, maybe with new tactics. And I think in the end you probably need a lot of people to pull this off rather than just one person walking around. Because I wouldn't say that the community necessarily ran to engage with me wholeheartedly. You know, those who did were wonderful, but I think a lot of people were more closed off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it didn't appeal to them to share themselves in that way. Even though I wasn't asking for anything personal, I would be very specific, like nothing with your name or address. It's really just, did you write a note down today? You know, do you have a receipt from someplace with no personal information, or a random matchbook or whatever it is, but, you know, a sign that you were here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite
project I've
project
ever done?
that you've done? Yeah. So I happened to pick this one because it was very unique to me.
Yeah,
as
it's weird.
Saw your announcements because I'm on your mailing list and such. So
I would say the last show I just did at Leon has been my really very personal, like, just a great show. It was I don't know. I'm really happy with the work. A lot of times post show, I think people experience this post like their wedding or something. You work on something for so long, and then you have the wedding, and the next day or the week after you feel like very blue, and you're like, oh, it's over. You know, it's a very odd feeling.
Well, you look forward to it. You're working toward it.
Yeah.
It's this bit,
and you have you have the adrenaline. You know, so shows can be like that. And the post-show blues are really real. You'll hear artists. If you mention that to an artist, they're very much like, oh, yeah. It gets very intense. And you
I had another interview. She called it the big event hangover.
Oh, yeah. That's
it. Is, I think
totally
with each area has their own name for it, right? The big event hangover. Yeah.
But
the post-show blues.
With this last show, so I've had a lot of art history education. I mentioned that I even had art history in high school for 2 years. And throughout that time, I realized, now that I'm 36, there's a huge lack of women artists present in my education, which I find it was really disappointing to look back. So there was an artist that sold, she has a show coming up at the National Gallery in England in April. Her name's Artemisia Gentileschi. And she sold a piece at Sotheby's in 2017. Her name comes up. I've heard of her father. She's a sort of late Renaissance, early Baroque painter, Italian. And I thought, I know nothing about this artist. How is this possible? She's making like heroic female-centered work, and I've never studied her. This is sort of ridiculous. And that's when I proposed to Leon. I don't know what the work looks like yet, but I want to study her, and I want to create a body of work that discusses the fact that nobody taught me about her, and there's a lack in my education about female perspective, representations of female perspective. And they were like, all right, let's do it. And I think it was the first time that I had a year to make a body of work, knowing where it was going to go, to like know the space and conceptualize what the space would, how you'd move through the space and what the work would look like and how it all felt together.
Which is a different way to work
Yes.
than before when you were just creating what you
Yes.
wanted, right? But this is very purposeful.
Very purposeful.
Wow.
And that's the way I like to work. I'm not very good at making like a one-off piece. I like to think about, and probably because I used to be a teacher and I used to work in museum education and things like that, that I think about, I want everyone to walk in the door and I want to be able to speak to everyone, which is not realistic, but how do you reach everybody? And I think that involves every element of the show, including the space and the colors and the, you know, everything, how you move your body and you face this way and you go from this piece to this piece, or so doing that, I think I made really beautiful work, and I think that I dove down deep. I mean, there was dips and, you know, making the work where I got a little existential and I thought, man, she was completely forgotten after she passed. I'm like, is that going to happen to me? And there's all elements to the show. But I think I didn't have post-show blues. I haven't, because there has been growth from the show, and new ideas that have come from it in a new way, which is really exciting, and that changes things. So I think that makes me really sort of pleased with this past exhibition. You know?
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing. I could talk to you all afternoon. I have so many questions about that whole process, but we are really at the point where we need to wrap up. So you had a very impactful moment with an artist who told you community. Mm-hmm. What would your word of advice be to a young artist?
Well, community is, especially for someone like me, and I think artists tend to have more personalities like I do, where you like to connect with people in the world. Community is essential. There's no way you can be isolated as a creative. It's just very difficult, and they keep you afloat. But I think other than that, I think going back thinking about what I said about college and stuff, I just think that as a creative, as an artist, you just need to be patient and think that all of your experiences inform your work. And
all of your experiences. The waiting the tables,
everything.
The meeting that gentleman who was 80 years old and befriending him, your backpacking.
Right.
Yeah.
You're meeting all different people. You're trying different jobs. You're doing all these things, and you will find out where that all serves its purpose later on, I think, or eventually, if you just keep at it, if you keep believing in yourself and you find ways to stay positive, because that's maybe one of the hardest parts is going back into your brain and telling your brain to stop, like, crashing, right? Like, no, you really can do this. You really are meant to do this. It will make sense. It will. So just keep going and value all of those opportunities and take your time. Don't, I don't know. I guess that's how I think. You don't have to rush off to the best art school in the country. You don't have to do this and that. But, if you'd rather just travel to Thailand for a little while, then do that,
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's so impactful, because I do think college gives you that sense of I'm in action, I'm taking action, I'm moving forward. At the same time, there's financial implications of that, and then it still may not be the action that you're needing. But
right.
Well, Kaitlyn, thank you so much for sharing your story, and it's one that's fascinating, and I want to definitely come back to you in about 6 months or a year and interview again and see, well, how did I get here to the next place that you're going to go? So thank you so much. And listeners, if you've enjoyed today's interview, please like us. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, my website, lifestorycurator.com, also on YouTube. So subscribe and you'll get more interviews like this. You can also post questions for me or for Kaitlyn, and I'll make sure that she gets them. And you can post those on lifestorycurator.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.